Prior to First Blood, action films consisted of 2, 3, 4 action scenes separated by dialogue.
Normally it had to have some credentials and some historical accuracy and some purpose behind it.
But it was always action that was needed to drive the story.
First Blood changed all that. And the novel, too, there'd never been a non-pulp novel that had been written with that much action in it.
What the 80s did is it brought all of that action to a place where it didn't need to be questioned by anyone.
The ones that sort of get spoken about in the same breath, like Commando and things like that, they don't have much emotional depth to them.
Other films knew the progenitor. So when Bruce Willis in Die Hard is doing his stuff, somebody says to him, "Who do you think you are, Rambo?"
Rambo is certainly one of the most well-known action heroes of the 80s and certainly kicked off a whole spate of imitators and a whole spate of action movies that became a genre in themselves.
Stallone as Rambo was just kind of fascinating, and maybe that's a testament to him as an actor that made him a character, made him different, but there hadn't been anything like him.
With that era, there was just something so weird going on with muscles.
Van Damme, Stallone, Schwarzenegger, you seemed to, if you worked out and did a bit of karate, you were suddenly an action hero.
You'd go and see these films to see what they'd kind of look like in those films, and there'd invariably be a scene that involved a sort of like loving, quasi-erotic sort of pan up their bodies as they sort of sheath a knife or like apply grease paint.
The VHS boom had a big play in it. People who were producing these films, they were able to make stuff a lot cheaper and get it out to a far wider audience. And with that success came the budgets to be more explosive and more excessive with it.
Go! 80s movies post-Star Wars and Jaws went global, and if you're going to go global, you want it as simple and cartoonish as possible.
How many people got killed in RoboCop? How many people got killed in Rambo 2 or Rambo 3? You know, it's about decimation. It's about how many people you can actually see to destroy.
In 80s action movies, women had it tough.
They're essentially just set dressing.
Very often it would be an attractive woman who'd sort of come into our hero's path by wonderful coincidence. And she might be a little bit feisty, but she generally needs helping, she generally needs saving, and she would sometimes pass away before the end of the movie. She didn't pass away, she would be the prize.
If you're a woman, like you don't have too long on the screen because you're going to die.
Those days are sort of long gone now, and it's one of the reasons they've dated so badly.
And it's very obvious while we're doing Rambo 3 in Israel that Gorbachev and Reagan were shaking hands at a thing called glasnost. And I did mention this to the producers and to Sly, you know, and they kind of looked at me with this crazy Brit.
When Stallone shot, takes down a helicopter with a bow and arrow, then everyone goes, "Oh no, that's a bit stupid." Wait a minute, this is all stupid. What's he doing? What's he taking on the Russians in Afghanistan?
The world was changing. We were killing about 15 Russians a day, and they were all trying to make friends, and which they did bring down that wall.
And it gets to a stage where you think, okay, enough already. It's becoming a parody of itself.
He wasn't necessarily a victim anymore. you know, so he was now seeing more of America's RoboCop, right? So now we're just going to send him wherever, you know, and he's going to take care of business. And you can only do that so many times where you're not feeling for the person anymore. I think you lost that character that they really built. You didn't feel for him.
Just about to crush me. I roll out of the way.
I guess I'm come from a period when there was no such thing as fix it in post. You know, you either did it or you didn't do it. You know,
there was no CG back then. The CG has dramatically changed filmmaking. Everything we did, it was all practical. It was all in the can.
What everybody forgets is that everything then was in camera. So if you're a pyrotechnic guy, you're blowing stuff up. You're not standing in front of a blue screen like you are now. So you get an explosion, but it's just a dust explosion. We'll put the flames on later. Then it's like properly, there's enough explosions to actually start a war or to genuinely blow up a tank. You know, it's wonderful revisiting those movies and just reminding yourself that actually went on. You know, that isn't CG. Those 80s action movies were real in-camera explosions.
The action movie archetype is a very American one, and it became so synonymous with essentially just two people, you know. Your Van Dammes and your Seagals didn't really get a look in. It was just Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone.
As the decade progressed, I think the limitations of what Schwarzenegger and Stallone were doing was pretty obvious.
I think it's fair to say that Stallone really at the time of certainly First Blood was by far the biggest star. It's easy to forget that in the late 70s he was winning Oscars for screenwriting for Rocky. He really was quite a kind of serious creative force.
Arnold with Joe Gold started the fitness revolution. You know, Gold's Gym was one of the first franchise gyms ever, and so that was his identity. That was what made him, you know, in a Hollywood superstar.
One of the things that excited me about working on First Blood is I knew going in Sylvester Stallone's a terrific actor. A lot of the public doesn't know that or doesn't think that because they believe the character that he's created. And if it's a guy who's not so bright, they believe that Stallone is not so bright, but Stallone's really smart.
Arnold, his presence, because obviously it wasn't so much his acting skills, and I think Stallone, to a certain degree, doesn't get enough respect for his acting skills.
and you always have to admire that Stallone, when he wrote Rocky, they loved the script, wanted to buy it, and no, you're not going to be Rocky, you know. And he said, then you don't have the script. Well, that took huge courage and belief.
Stallone understands the public expectation of movie stars. They're bigger-than-life characters, and so he created a bigger-than-life physique.
The biggest difference, I suppose, and the biggest contrast between the two guys at the time really was what was driving them. I mean, I think Arnie did want to be the biggest star in the world, and probably at that time he was already looking beyond Hollywood and what he could achieve later. Stallone saw himself more as, first and foremost, a filmmaker, someone who had stories to tell, and often fronted those himself.
There definitely was a rivalry between both Sly and Arnie, and it's something that they encouraged in talk shows. They encouraged it in movies. You see it referenced in, films like Stop and My Mom Will Shoot, where they actually make a little Sly, as you like, reference to the other person. And, it became bankable. To have a little joke about the two of them, actually boosted both their careers.
One of the strings that Stallone had to his bow, I think, compared to Schwarzenegger, was the levels of the Rambo character. I think Schwarzenegger had a load more characters who were famous, a load more roles that were kind of, symbolic or huge or kind of like sort of globally renowned. But I think very few of them probably had the levels of a Rambo and a Rocky.
With Stallone, you get the idea from the very beginning that the man wants to act. He wants to be Kirk Douglas, and he wants to be a revered actor, and he wants to be at the Oscars.
I think all top-tier Hollywood stars are completely in competition with each other. But Arnold Schwarzenegger cannot hold a candle to Sly. No. I mean, Terminator, yeah, but no.